Hello. Hey, everybody. So we're gonna get the Q&A started now. Gonna introduce our guests here. Got James Clyne, uh, Oren Soffer, Gareth Edwards, production designer, co-DP, director.
Hello, hello, check, check.
Hello.
Hey, everyone.
This is a very nice, would you call it a college or a university or something else?
College.
A college,
ArtCenter College
art center.
Of art and design.
of design. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great.
These chairs are a little funny. They normally,
I know there's usually a little footrest.
but we just get to dangle here.
No, we'll dangle.
So a lot of timely topics in the film. Human interaction with AI, upper atmosphere, military, uh, you know, apparatus. It's kind of daunting, but what inspired you to make the film, and why did you feel it was, what was pushing you to make the film?
That all sounds very timely and relevant and thoughtful. For me, it was very simple. There's like a holy trinity of science fiction, and I'm a science fiction fan, I guess. And there's basically alien monsters, spaceships, and robots. And I'd done a film with alien monsters and I'd done a film with spaceships. I was like, it's time for a robot movie. And and so it was going to be an AI film, but the second you pick AI as your subject matter, and this was before all the chat GPT insanity that's happening right now. Um, it was you pick it as a subject matter and suddenly you realize it's a really fascinating thing. Like, all kinds of philosophical dilemmas appear, like, are they real? What is it? Does it matter? Can you tell the difference? What if they do something you don't like? Can you turn them off? What if they don't want to be turned off? All this sort of stuff. And so that started to become as much the story as this kind of fairy tale about, I guess, a reluctant father, like father-child kind of dynamic across a landscape. And I was sort of doing something else, and I was in Thailand, and I was weirdly on the actual beach that the film set in at the beginning, and a friend texted me and said, "I'm in Vietnam. I heard you're in Thailand. Why don't you fly over? It's only like $50 for a flight, like hang out." So I went, and and my experience of Vietnam is mainly through the movies, and so I knew I wanted to do this robot film, and I was seeing all this Vietnam imagery, that I associate with things like Apocalypse Now and Platoon or whatever. But picturing everything as robots. So you'd see like Buddhist monks going to a temple. And in my mind, I'm like, imagine that was a robot. And I got really excited. Like, this is a kind of science fiction visual that I've not seen, that doesn't, like, there's so few places you can go in science fiction that isn't just completely like another film. And so it just felt like this idea of like going to Southeast Asia, shooting it in real locations, and then making everything like AI. I was like, okay, that feels, I would want to go see that film. And that was like enough to just start this whole journey, really.
Monsters is a fantastic film. It's like for me, it was like a masterclass in how to use visual effects. And I was wondering your process making this film and filmmaking for you in general. How are you navigating using visual effects when you approach projects and projects like this in general?
Yeah. So my background, I went to film school, thought what would happen is you'd make oh, sorry, I don't want to, spoiler alert. When you finish film school, you don't get, well, most of you don't get this massive Hollywood blockbuster gig. You suddenly have to go back and live with your parents and go, what am I doing with my life? And so I ended up, not you won't, you're going to be great. Okay. And so I ended up going home and going, oh, what am I going to do? And Jurassic Park had come out of the cinema. It was clearly computer graphics with a future of filmmaking, bought a computer, learned all that stuff. And then my goal was like, okay, I can use this now and go make a film. And 10, 15 years went by. I still hadn't made a film. And so that film you mentioned, Monsters, was me and basically a few friends. We went around Central America, shot this movie, did it all really guerrilla, just five of us in a van. And it basically got, we screened it at some film festivals, and I got really lucky and it got me the Godzilla gig. And so I got to do Godzilla and then Star Wars. And I felt like there was something about that process of making a film with just 5 people and being really guerrilla about it that was so liberating and so creative that I really wanted to find this hybrid that married kind of the free creative freedom of an indie, low budget movie, but with the scope and scale of a giant blockbuster, a theatrical release and everything. And so this really was, with these guys, it was an attempt to and I wouldn't say we bullseyed it, but we got closer than I thought we would in terms of marrying those two worlds.
James, so you have like a pretty impressive resume, and
Come on, read it out. Come on, let's do
Thank
it.
you.
yeah, you know,
1997, movie called Instinct. Nobody ever saw. There's a long list of movies no one ever saw, but thank you.
so I want to know how you guys worked together in figuring out what the film looked like. But we were talking for a second before the screening, and your career at ArtCenter is pretty interesting, and how you got going. Do you mind talking about that a little bit? What you started here doing, and then where it advanced to?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, ArtCenter was kind of a primer for everything we did in this film. There's vehicle design, there's architecture, there's world building, there's even robotics. So even though I didn't study those specifically, I started in transportation design and product design. I think it kind of like started to inform where we wanted to go with this movie. And fortunately, Gareth is a huge fan of like Sid Mead and Ron Cobb and all these artists that we were just kind of drawn to simply because we, well, you're a little younger than me, but we grew up on these movies from the 80s and 70s and 90s where they just had so much design stuffed into each film that we thought if we can get just a fraction of that, we'll be off to the races. So, but we started just having by a conversation. So I think we're at Barney's Beanery in Santa Monica for like 3 hours. I think you pitched the movie for about 5 minutes, but then we just started spinning off and like sci-fi geekdom for
Talking about girls, things like that.
well, in sci-fi context,
Yeah.
of course.
Amazing
Aaron Gray
costumes,
from
female costumes, amazing.
yeah.
Buck Rogers
Buck
came up a lot.
Rogers, yeah, Blue Lycra. But so a lot of like what I was taught at ArtCenter kind of informed where we went with the look of the movie. So it's a very surreal kind of full 360 experience right now.
Cool.
Actually, what he's leaving out is so to sort of get a film off the ground, one of the things you do to visually explore it is what I would call kit bashed concept art, so visual. So I'd find images and I would use my Photoshop skills, whatever you want to call that, but kind of cut and paste and make visuals for the film, kind of riffing off photography and other artwork. And
You could call it theft.
yeah,
Just let's call it what it is.
and so I had all this imagery and I didn't realize it, but we're sitting there and I'm explaining the movie to him and I get to the last image, get to an image of that. You see it actually in the movie pretty similar where Alfie is just looking at the destroyed Nomad. And I show it to James and he just laughs. I'm thinking, oh, this isn't going very well. And he's like, oh, that's my artwork. And it was one of those moments where it's like, well, I guess you got the job then.
By default, you had to hire me.
Or he would sue me. So
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
steal it.
I've got good lawyers. But I think a lot of artists may see that as like somebody just riffing off or stealing your art, but filmmaking, if anything, it's a collaborative effort. It's like hundreds of people all getting together trying to envision what the director is trying to envision. So I wasn't offended. I was that was nothing but like, just awesome praise that you would use something like that.
that's what my lawyers argued back as well.
But so when you're prepping to shoot and the production design here could have gone pretty deep, but at a point you're choosing visual effects. When you guys were prepping the project, where were you gauging and aside from the obvious stuff, but where to implement visual effects and how to use instead of props and such?
I mean, we did kind of hit the gamut of everything. I mean, Gareth was like talking about like the look of the movie, and we didn't want to do some kind of predictor of the future. We wanted to kind of embrace some of like Japanese Walkman's product design from the 90s. And Gareth's like, I'll just go on eBay and I'll buy like 30 different things off eBay and we'll put them in the movie. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Well, that's a great idea. We'll actually make stuff like that and spend a bunch of money. But in the end, Gareth went on eBay, bought a bunch of stuff, and most of that probably made it into the movie. So in a way, we kind of used everything. We took pre-existing props, pre-existing pieces of, we kit bashed in real time with like real things, but at the same time, we would then go off and use some amazing technology like Stagecraft, which is this big, massive 360-degree LED screen. So it really was just about what informed
There were,
the story at the time.
there was like the whole spectrum, and the whole movie's like this. There's like, we went from shooting with 5 people in the Himalayas, and a week earlier we were on the most expensive soundstage in London shooting the Stagecraft technology, which everyone knows as the Mandalorian screens.
The volume.
And but like, so they've hit, so we did eBay stuff where we would hack up like 1980s objects and glue them together and make them look like some sci-fi shape. And equally, we used Weta Workshop in the other end of the spectrum to do all the hero, like all the any object that gets proper screen time was like by Weta and their design team and that, and they did an amazing job. And they're in the building, so I'm giving them a shout out.
But then my department would have to take a Nerf gun, paint it black, and call it a prop.
Yeah,
But
so all the guns, like
Yeah.
honestly, it's a complete range of approaches. So all the guns, like on the bridge scene where there's smoke and everything, and all those guns they're holding, they're Nerf guns, and they're just sprayed black, and we've stuck long pipes on the end, and it's for real. Got Ken Watanabe and everybody next to like just water pistols, and they're like, "What's going on?"
Oren, I'm a big fan of you and your work and your ethos and the way you talk about cinematography and touching on the design stuff. You have a very refined style, I feel like, with shooting, and genres like sci-fi being so heavily designed. What was your approach to lighting, especially with being on location? And was there something specific that you prepped for, or that how you were approaching shooting in general for the whole film?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the cinematography on this film is a little complex because there's 2 of us. And then there's sort of a third leg to the tripod, which is Gareth, who is operating the camera and is really in the driver's seat of where the camera is pointing, what's in frame, compositions, camera movement, and all of it. And taking a step back from that, like when I stepped into this project, I mean, I had only done like little indie films before this. And on a little indie film, usually what happens is you read a script and it's lovely, or it's not, could be shit. But you sit down with the director and you're like, okay, what does it look like? And then they usually go, well, I don't know. Like, let's talk about it. And then you talk, and then 2 weeks go by, and then you're like, oh shit, we have to start filming. And then you have 3 weeks, and then you're done. And on this project, it was the first time I'd stepped into something where there was such a fully formed world by the time I came on board this project, because these guys have been working on it for years. And I came on and saw concept art. Gareth shot a proof of concept short film that was used to pitch the movie, that went through ILM, visual effects, design work, everything. And there's shots from it in the movie. It's that well integrated. So like I already saw that, and you see the concept art, you see all the work that they've been doing, and you're like, oh, this is what the movie looks like. Like the aesthetic of it, the world that was built, and what Gareth wanted to accomplish was so clear. And to me, that's actually a DP's dream, is to come into a fully realized world and say, oh God, I get to play in this world and help realize it, as opposed to like, oh, I need to sit here and figure out what this looks like. So it was really great. And the ethos of the filming made my job, I mean, I guess I wouldn't say easy, but maybe a little easy, because It was very naturally based on natural light and based on available light. And sometimes we would have to artificially create it, but we always had a benchmark of, we just want this to look unlit. We want it to look like we got super lucky. Like when Gareth filmed the proof of concept film, he's just traveling around these countries, just himself and his producer and a camera, and getting the most gorgeous footage you've ever seen at the perfect time of day. And then you're like, oh, well, we just need to get that. Like, we just needs to look like that. It's simple. But
Oren's playing things down a little bit. Because so we did, I think I would think that it was innovative in that so like on a normal movie, so we were shooting, you guys all know this because film students and all sorts here, right? So we can talk a bit technical. So we were using a Sony FX3, and the great thing about that, it shoots at 12,800 ISO, which basically means you can film in kind of moonlight conditions and still see. And so it's so sensitive to light that we didn't need to have the giant lights. You can talk about Nancy maybe. And
yeah. Well, exactly. So I think what ended up being interesting about the visual approach in terms of lighting and camera is that it's very much the same ethos as spray painting the Nerf guns. Like, there were some scenes where we had all the bells and whistles. I mean, we were in London on Pinewood stages with carts full of lights where you're like, I didn't know we had all of
two scenes we did that.
Exactly.
And then like 98 where we did.
Yeah. So it runs the gamut from that, or some big night exteriors where we had big lights set up in the lifts, although slightly smaller lights than usual because of how sensitive the camera is, but still, night exterior, you have to light it up. And then it ran that gamut to, we're shooting in a village in the north of Thailand, and we have some LED tubes, and we needed to diffuse it. So we put a empty rice bag on the LED tube for diffusion, because that's what we had lying around. So we used that. So it kind of ran the spirit of that, like, scrappiness and that using the resources that you have ran through every department, including camera and lighting.
When you have like basically a battery operated light, because one of the big thing that happens on a film set is that you shoot in one direction, right? And there's those lights on stands and everything and cables and things. And then you go, okay, now I want to shoot here. Okay, move the lights. 20 minutes go by. Okay, we done it. Shoot that direction. Okay, now we want to do the reverses. Okay, move everything. 20 minutes goes by. And your whole day in the pie chart is nearly half waiting for the lights to move and things like this. And so with these LED lights, just like you have a boom operator with the microphone on the end of a pole, it's like, well, why don't we have someone holding the lights on the end of a pole? And that way, as we shoot the scene and suddenly want to go over here and look that way, they can just move the light instantly. And so things that would take maybe 10, 15 minutes were happening in 5 seconds. And so it was like a really fast way of working, and we could shoot loads more and be more.
Yeah. I mean, the idea was to have it feel like you were traveling around with two people in these beautiful locations and pointing the camera in a certain direction and just getting the best looking like thing imaginable, and you just got really lucky. But behind the camera, there's all these things moving around to make that happen. So our best boy electric, Nancy, was sort of tasked with the LED light on the boom pole, and the gaffer and I are sat at the monitor basically watching the image, and wherever Gareth's pointing the camera, we're like making adjustments kind of into a little microphone, having people sneak into frame and maybe move a light out or put a light in, or have Nancy swing the boom over, or like, oh, quick, cover up that window, it's front lighting this. And then I think Gareth would describe, like, because he's operating the camera, so he's seeing the image on the monitor, and then he would say sometimes like, oh, I pointed the camera in a certain direction and it wasn't looking so great, and then while you're watching the take progress, it's like, oh, the lighting was getting a little bit better.
So Oren had, I don't know what was the software, but on the iPad.
Oh yeah, well, the lights that we use all have built-in software, so it's aperture lights mostly, and they just use an app on the iPad.
So the trick was, if you play with the lights during a take, if you do something like quick, like if you flick a light, it kills the take, right? So if someone's doing a great little performance and then suddenly the light flicks down or up or something, you can't use that. So it was like, by all means, change the brightness of everything, but just do it really gradually so it's subconscious. And so you would move the camera and it'd be like, this is nice, but it's like 6 out of 10, you know what I mean? And then as I was filming a few seconds later, 10 seconds later, I'd be like, well, this is like an 8 or a 9 out of 10. And it's because Oren's sitting there going, that one down, like pull that one down, put that one up, and suddenly the light's just shifting around and in real time. And
Yeah. But so that's pretty much the ethos of the whole visual approach in terms of the lighting. And it completely integrated into what these guys had worked on in terms of designing the world. It's a lot of practical lights, a lot of stuff built into costumes with Weta, built into the sets. So the idea was always that it would feel like we got really lucky. Like it's very natural lighting that looks like the most cinematic lighting. You just walked into these amazing locations. But there's often a lot of work and finesse behind the scenes to make that happen. But we always wanted it to feel unintrusive, and we wanted to maintain that kind of documentary guerrilla kind of scrappy feel that Gareth was describing. That was sort of the idea of how can we make a movie like that, but with a bigger scope.
I think you're being a little kind when you say everything's been worked out, because part of the ethos of this project, which all came from Gareth, was there'd be a couple of design phases. There would be initial design phase where we had to make sure we had certain props and set deck. There was a whole nother phase that Gareth planned where a big chunk of the movie hadn't even been designed yet. So typically in a movie, you kind of build the whole world out. You say, okay, this is the world. We've got to kind of follow all these little tracks that we've laid and kind of build it on that. But Gareth and Oren shot this movie, and Gareth had the faith that, hey, we can go back into this. We can build on top of that movie. And it was a little scary because nobody had kind of done it before. But we did this test that Oren spoke of earlier. And it was kind of proof positive that it could work. And it was kind of like, the way I describe it is, if you had the ability to build a house anywhere you wanted to, you would find the land first, and then you'd build the house on the land. You wouldn't kind of design the house first. And Oren and Gareth just found the best land that is on Earth, and we just built upon that land. So it was kind of a revolutionary way of doing it. And I think by doing that, it just, everything kind of melted together and felt cohesive rather than trying to anticipate it early. It all kind of just worked together because you guys shot a great movie.
Well, shucks.
But leaning back into the camera, so you're speaking of it being able to perform in low light, but the form factor of it is a very small camera. So was this because you want to be able to move through spaces easily? You want to handhold it? What was the motivation for getting such a small camera?
well, I'm not very strong, and I was operating.
Yeah. Gareth's operating 40-minute takes in the tropics.
Yeah.
In 90-degree heat and 100% humidity. And the cameras are heavy. But it was, we had sort of identified, or you guys had identified the Ronin RS2 gimbal as sort of the basis of the camera rig. And it has a limit on the weight that it can carry. And it's just a small gimbal.
Yeah, if we were to have, so honestly, if that, like the Arri, I don't know what it costs, right? But let's just say an Arri is at like $80,000, right?
Yeah.
With all the spec'd out version. And our camera was 4,000. I would have paid, or we would have paid 80,000 for the camera we used if it was the other way around. Like, it was the fact it was so small and light, and we had it on a gimbal as well. So that if you have a big camera, then the gimbal's bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've got one of these things where you look like Sigourney Weaver from Aliens just to carry a camera, and it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
And then you need trucks for that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it just grows and grows and grows. And it's like the smaller the thing at the start of this process, the smaller all the infrastructure around it is.
Exactly. There's a knock-on effect. And we carried multiple camera bodies that were set up in different configurations. And every little knock-on effect of having the small camera body affects the size of the dolly you can put it on. Our dolly was like that big. I mean, it was like a foot. Because you don't need a full-size dolly. You don't need a full-size techno crane.
Like, you don't need to ride the dolly, because with the Ronin or the RS2, it comes with this silly little app where it uses the gimbal in your iPhone, and as you rotate your phone, the camera rotates.
Controls the camera.
And so it's like, well, if we just stick the phone on the back of the director's monitor, when I move the monitor, the camera will move just like I'm looking through the camera.
No.
And so then we don't need to ride the camera. So therefore now the dolly, you can pick it up and you can move it over here and put it down. And so you can do dolly shots and reset them, which again normally takes 10 to 15 minutes. and you can move the dolly in like 10 seconds and do a new dolly shot if that didn't work, and try all sorts of things. And
And it opened up our drone. There's a lot of drone shots in the film. We flew that camera, the little camera. So it just has that knock-on effect. And you see it, like the camera truck shows up and it's one fairly small truck and all the cameras are in little like container store containers because they're small, they're just padded. And you don't need all the infrastructure. And I think that was really part of the ethos of keeping the shoots as small as we could on set, the footprint small, so that we could be nimble and shoot on mountaintops and crazy terrain and all these amazing locations we went to.
With Monsters, to harp on that again, your style of filmmaking was, like you said, walking around with a camera and some actors, essentially. Your process in making films like that, do you notice it from other films like Rogue One, where your performance is maybe different with actors when they don't have large camera systems like in their face, or maybe disrupting a performance, or is that ever like a thing, or is that?
it's an interesting thing in that I've heard when you hear other directors, because I'm never hanging out on a set of another director, so I never really see how other people do it. But when you hear other directors in interviews like this talk about their process, I know there's a few very famous ones that talk very strongly about not being in Video Village and being near the camera because they want to see the performance. They want to be able to talk to the actor. You know what I mean? They want to be there for the actor, and it kind of raises their game a little bit. And I think operating is like that because I'm like, they're right there. I could, if I pushed forward, I'd hit them in the head. And so that you're really there and you can feel it. And so feedback isn't really, you can do it during the take. You can just whisper it. Do you know what I mean? Like you can just say something. And I found on some other films where I've not quite done that is, and what I've operated maybe is I'll be watching in the Video Village and there'll be a certain level of energy. And for whatever reason, I go, I'm going to go grab the camera, and I grab it and I start operating, and it goes up. The energy goes up in the actors because it's a bit like, oh shit, the boss is here, or some sort of weird psychology of like, oh shit, like, because you're hidden. So there's this feeling of like, I don't know, that it's not really happening or something. And then when you're there, it just, I don't know, it goes up a notch. And I find, even though it can probably hurt me as a director operating, because I'm also worrying about composition, but weirdly, I find the performance comes through to me as part of all that process. It's not like, oh, I'd have to watch it back. I'm not sure what the performance was like. You're very aware of what the performance is like as part of that process. And I think it's because you're so close, you can't escape it. You've got an opinion at the end of the take, what you want to change or not.
And also hurt you physically. Your poor back.
Yeah.
It's a physical and emotional hurt.
And then so during filmmaking, how much of it was like, because of the stuff is heavily in post with the VFX, are you changing a lot of stuff throughout the production, or is it the world is pretty rigid?
The simplest way to explain how we did it is, and it's not quite true, but it's a very simple way to understand it. And it happened on that first test, and we kind of applied this as a rule through the movie itself. Is imagine shooting a movie. So basically, every single shot in the film, there's not really any green screen. There's occasionally something, right? And once in a blue moon, but 97% of the film has no green screen or anything. And it's real locations that are the closest thing to the actual thing in the movie. And then if there's a giant building, we film a building, even knowing like we're going to replace that vehicle is going to get replaced. Like we had Ford Transit vans as the vehicles, and then we digitally changed them all to be like more sci-fi. And so then you basically, and I would do it with James, like we would share desktops and I would just watch him paint all day. But it would be like, I would grab a frame from the film, give it to him straight away, and then he would start painting on it, and we would like try ideas. It was like no more than a minute an idea. You're like, just like Rocky training, like montage stuff, like, okay, move on, next idea. And at the end of that, we look back at like 20 ideas and then pick our 2 favorites and then play with them and do little versions of that. And after a couple of hours, we were like, we had something we all really liked. And then that that would then kind of go to ILM and become the basis of the shot, just make it look like that. And because it's based on a real frame that looks good and is real, it's easier in a weird way to make the final thing look good and real, because it's compositionally correct and lighting is correct. And it was, I mean, you can speak to it.
Yeah, I mean, ILM had something to go off of. So there was dust or dirt kicking off the back of the car as it's driving down a dirt road. The physics of the car, the speed of the car was all kind of all there. All that information was there. It was just a new design that we didn't have the budget to build a $500,000 sci-fi car, but we had all the information of a real car that allowed ILM to go in and go, okay, even though this doesn't look like a car that exists today, we can use the physics and the lighting of how reflections hit the windshield, and use all that information. So the whole time is that we spend on these movies is we're trying to confuse the audience into understanding what's real and what's not real. I think that's, in a way, my job is to make things almost invisible, even though they're like big mega structures or weird robots. You don't want the audience going, oh, that little thing doesn't look real or doesn't look like it's living in that environment. We put all our effort into making sure that nobody's really thinking about that. They're thinking about the story or the action or whatever.
Like if you, an example of that would be if we did the design first, right? And we were like, okay, let's create some really cool monolithic sci-fi building, and we do a whole stack of designs. That's a cool shape, like that building. Great, go model that in 3D or whatever it is you're going to do. That's our shape. Now we go film the film. When you come back and you stick that building into a field or something, you just would look at it and go, so obviously stuck in. It doesn't feel like anything else in this image. But if you wait until post-production, until the edit to design it, what we were doing is we would take the materials from the foreground, so whatever was in the rocks of a wall or the materials of housing, and we would use those same materials in the monolithic structure, and we would use colors from the foreground in the background, and essentially trick the eye. So that crazy wacky thing back there has got to be fake, but this thing right here has got to be real. But if you give someone a pen and said, draw where you think we've added it, and I think you draw it wrong because we've taken things and put them and in a way that it tricks the mind as to where it began and ended. Like it's all a bit of design magic.
Yeah, there's this great shot. I just poked my head in at the end, and there's this shot. It's a throwaway, like you'd have to kind of go and look at it to know what I'm talking about. But it's in the end montage, and there's a shot of some of the missiles kind of flying through the atmosphere, and it's in probably Kathmandu, Nepal, something like some monastery type courtyard, and there's people looking up, and then in the background there's this big sci-fi building, but the design on it looks like the kind of stone structures of the buildings in the foreground.
Yeah,
because and that was, I think, from your proof of concept film, I think.
are you talking about the one with the missiles coming down?
They go across the horizon, right?
Yeah, that they're going across.
It was Kathmandu, yeah.
It's Kathmandu.
Yeah, we did that pretty late, but it was exactly what Gareth was. We were literally picking colors, making sure that those shapes.
And it looks like this big monolithic structure that somebody like built out of stone
and that was
materials like the foreground.
We did so many one-offs in the movie. I mean, Gareth was just bloodthirsty for so many one-offs. He's like, can we just get one more in? Just one more in. And I thought we were like done with it months prior. And like Gareth would just send me an email and go like, here's one more shot. Let's just see what we can do with this. And I think because of the rhythm that Gareth had created with ILM and the other vendors, was they were able to kind of ingest those sketches pretty quickly and get them into a shot. Sometimes you called it 2.5D, but they would kind of take the illustration and give it parallax or do a little bit of 3D modeling, but we weren't building the whole. There's a tendency to want to build the whole world in 3D, so in case the director wants to go, well, I like this shot but I want to see the reverse. We didn't do that because Gareth's like, here's the plate. There's no other shot in the movie. Just do this shot. So we just got confident like so often of like, okay, let's do another one. Let's do another one. And they become these like one-off shots where I remember seeing like Empire Strikes Back, and it felt like there was so much visual content in it. I just want to keep going back and seeing it over and over again. And I feel like this movie captured that, where I just want to go back and see those little shots that are just, the camera doesn't stay long. It just kind of goes quickly through it, but it just creates a bigger and bigger world.
Then how was it working with actors and having a heavy effects process going on, and certain things being built, not built, and then alluding to them being there? And what's that process like?
It was super easy, 10 times easier than a normal way, because we were really on a bridge, really in sweaty Thailand, really with smoke, really in a tank. And versus the other version is we're in a studio in London with green screen everywhere. And so everyone's like, great. Like, this is fantastic. And so all they had to do, and they don't care, is, oh, it won't be this crappy little tank that we've hired for the day that's really an amphibious truck. It'll be this giant mega thing, and you're just coming out of a door from the giant mega tank. Okay, got it. And they don't question it beyond that. And so it's really helpful. I think it was not a problem. The thing that was super interesting, is probably worth talking about real quick, is the AI of it all, and the robots. We didn't want people wearing those silly pajamas where they got all the dots on them, the motion capture suits, because two reasons. One, it looks really silly and no one wants to wear those. And the second is that you're committed to that person's a robot for the rest of that scene. And typically what can happen is, you start editing the scene and suddenly it's just their shoulder in shot. And you're like, great, that's a 20 grand robot shot for an out of focus shoulder. And so the deal with the vendors and ILM was, look, I know this feels suicidal, but I think there's some sense in it, which is, can we not do any dots on anyone? Can we not have any pajamas? And the upside is we can just pick people where your eye goes in each shot. So we can cut the movie. And there was this great day in post-production about halfway through the edit where we got to choose who was a robot and who wasn't. And nobody knew who was doing the performances. And so you end up with situations where, which I love, my favorite things in the film are throwaway performances by AI and robots where they're just sort of like smoking a cigarette, or they're laid back, or they're like giving a kid some chocolate, just stuff you don't see in movies because no one throws it away like that because it's so expensive. That's when it felt like, oh, that's what we're doing different. That's where our film comes alive, where it feels like we're offering something that, because it's so hard to do that in a science fiction film. Everything's nearly been done. And so, yeah, like, I mean, James can probably talk about all the robot designs because we were very much riffing off old technology. And
yeah, I mean, one of the big design cues was Gareth. I don't know where you came up with the idea, but you wanted a hole through the entire cranium. And I think it was just more of like this impossibility. Like, you can't fake that with makeup or prosthetic. It was like, obviously it had to either exist or was some visual effect. So going off of that, that was kind of the big cue of like, okay, there's a hole through the head. What does that mean for the technology around the head? How does that integrate with the skin? And ILM was great at kind of trying to find a way for the skin to kind of butt up against the metal of the cranium. But I wanted to ask you, I never asked you, like, what was Maddie's first reaction, like when she saw herself? Because the main actress, she had never probably seen much, even artwork, I'm assuming. When
yeah,
was
so
the first
the
time
little
she
girl
saw
was called
herself
was
like that?
Madeline, the girl that played the AI in the whole movie, the child. Typically what happens in a film, and it's really a frustrating moment, is actors come in to do what's called ADR. So they sort of do lines of dialogue, and they do it, like in a sound studio. And it's the first time they've seen anything from the film. And your last time you saw them was on the shoot, and you haven't seen them for 6 months. They turn up, there's a little bit of a reunion, then you hit play on certain scenes. And it's really bad because you want to sit and show them the whole movie, but it's not finished yet. But they see these random images. And I remember she came in and she saw herself with the hole and everything. And she sort of got tearful and was giggling loads. and was really embarrassed and was like covering her face because she was, it was like such a shock. But equally, it was a shock for her to see herself bald. She had her head shaved, obviously, for the movie, and she'd grown it back by then. And so I think that was also like, equally like shocking to her. Like, oh my God, I forgot I'm bald. And we had a deal. I said to her when she first got shaved, I felt so bad because she just like got upset when she saw herself, right? She's a little 6 or 7 year old then. And I felt so bad. And I said, Madeline, if you do this at the end of the shoot, not at the beginning, at the end of the shoot, you can shave my head. And I thought she's going to forget, right? I'm not going to have to do that every day. She's like, can I shave your head? And I'm like, yeah. Like she'll forget. She didn't. And at the end of the shoot, I had a complete bald haircut from Madeline. She did a little like Travis Bickle taxi driver mohawk.
There is a video of it
that is never going on the internet.
Never to be seen, but I've never seen somebody more maniacal. Like her face in that video, she is like,
she's so happy.
She's a very stoic person. Her personality is almost kind of similar to the character. She's very zen, calm. She would sit on set and just read a book, like just not what you would expect a 7-year-old girl. And in that video, I was like, oh, there's the child. There's the giddy, excited, like hyper person who's so excited to shave your head.
Do we have a couple minutes to throw?
I thought you were going to say, do we have the video?
Do we have the video?
Oh, the video, yeah.
Roll the video.
Cue it up. Cue it up.
Roll it.
Yeah. Just any questions out here? Do someone want to? You want to mic there?
Oh, they set one up.
I
That's
have
nice.
to go up. Tell your life story now.
So my life story is my name's Jordan. I'm in the film department. I want to be a production designer. So of course my question is for you, Mr. Clyne. I did stalk your IMDb and I'm fangirling a little bit. But you've worked on a lot of projects that are also franchises. I know this is your first being production designer, but I wanted to ask how the process and the challenges differ when it comes to the art process for designing stuff for something with an already established world like Star Wars versus this, where you get to sort of start from scratch and build.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there is kind of a research part of it that we all start with. And for the creator, Gareth loves grabbing research, and I probably still have it on my hard drive of thousands of images of just graphic design, thousands of images of just product design. But we would just go through them, like hundreds of images. I would gather my own images and we kind of share them back and forth. But a lot of it just starts with research. So, I worked on Lincoln and it was about the Civil War. I didn't really pay attention in high school about the Civil War, but it gave me an opportunity to kind of go back and like research what was the daily life of somebody living that life in the late 1800s. So I don't see the creator or Star Wars any different. I just try to do as much research with Star Wars. Gareth knows this. There were two artists, Joe Johnston and Ralph McQuarrie, who basically laid the map for Star Wars. And for me personally, I just wanted to try my best to emulate those two guys because they were the guys. They were like the architects, and I was just like a little guy with a little hammer and nail trying to build the same thing. So much to say, it's all about research, kind of who your influences are, who the director's influences are, and trying to mesh and jazz with that, and you go from there.
Thank you.
Whilst we wait for the next question, actually, where's the person walks up? I'm going to say something. Is that right? But we'll pick someone. Next question. Oh, you there? Okay. I do want to do a shout out to Atlas Lenses, who organized this. We shot a lot of the film on vintage lenses, and because I love the qualities, the characteristics of, as we all do, from those 70s and 80s films. And I met with Dan and Forrest a long time ago, and we talked about this. And I don't know if this is true, but they claim that they went away and made this lens kind of just for us, which was the Mercury.
Mercury, yeah.
And essentially it's really hard to get a very characterful wide angle lens on an anamorphic, and they managed to create this thing. And so the wide shots, the wide angle shots in the movie are all the Mercury.
Yeah, 42 millimeter Mercury prototype that we had thanks to our friends at Atlas on the set, and for the nerds out there. And yeah, the rest of the film was on a 75 millimeter Koa, but
which you can't buy.
No,
you have to. But if you want a new lens, you have to go to Atlas.
You have to go to Atlas to get new lenses. But yeah, thank you again.
First, congratulations on the film to the three of you. First time I watched it in the theaters, like fell in love with it on a personal level. Gareth, so much of your work feels personal, but then here, like watching it a second time, hands down, I feel like it's going to grow in the public and just like gain a greater appreciation over time. I hope more people get to see it. But my question is for you, Gareth. Like I said,
this is my brother, by the way. He comes to all the screenings. Okay. Go on, Todd. Sorry.
So much of your work feels personal, whether it's like an original project, like Monsters, like True Love. I mean, the creator.
Yeah, it was called True Love.
Actually, your brother.
Have you got it? Have you got it? You got the tattoo? So Oren got basically it was called True Love.
Yeah.
And that was the working title for the very last second before Disney said we should change it because it sounds like a rom-com. And so I had to break it to Oren, who had got a tattoo of True Love. But it's actually a better thing, right? No, it's
better because it's the original title.
Yeah.
It's the one that we called it for 2 years. So that's, to me, it's always True Love.
It's all good. I'm here for it. But with all your projects, like feeling so personal, you have to be your biggest champion, like selling it to the studio, to the audience, writing it, directing it. So what happens when you have moments of like hesitation or doubt about your ability personally, or whether the project is worth making? How do you grapple with that? How do you overcome it? Thank you.
No, cheers. I will genuinely answer that question because I think it's important, and I think there's some filmmakers in the room, and I struggle with that all the time. Like, it's the number one problem of making a film is essentially you're taking, depends on the film, but you're taking a lot of money, and in this case, millions and millions and millions of dollars from strangers, promising you'll return it in 2 years by doing your art, right? And you just spend the whole time going, what am I doing? Like, I'm kidding myself. You know what I mean? Like, I all day long, every day, spend the whole time thinking I'm deluded. I've made a terrible mistake. And basically the graph of making a film, and I'm only saying this if it helps other people who feel this way and go, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing it, because I just is the graph of making a film is when you're on your own and you start fantasizing about, oh, you know what, I think would make a good film, or I'd like to see it. It's blah blah blah, blah. And you start picturing this film. It gets better and better. You listen to music, you not necessarily write it, but you just conceive it, and it just goes higher and higher and higher. And then basically in pre-production, the graph goes up to like the level of a masterpiece. Like in your head, you're like, I think we're gonna make the greatest film ever made, right? Else you wouldn't bother, right? You've got to aim really crazy high. It's so stressful, and there's so much of blood, sweat, and tears. So you aim crazy high. You go, I think it might be really, really good. And then you start making it. And one day at a time, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And you're like, this is not how I pictured it. It's all going wrong. And by the end of the shoot, the lowest point on that graph is the day they show you the assembly. So basically the day the editor has put something together without a single conversation and just kind of shows you all the material. And I always start off that screening by explaining, if I don't commit suicide by the time the credits roll, that is a win, right? Like, and I mean it. Like, I am going to want to kill myself. And it's nothing to do with the editor or anything. It's literally the realization of, oh my God, I didn't get anything the way I thought I had it. And then as you edit, it gets a little better the next day. You cut all that shit out that was terrible, and a little better, a little better. And over the whole process of editing, it goes up and up and up and up. A great film is when it goes up and up and up, and it reaches a similar level, a dotted line, if you could draw that ruler, to where you first were, right? I've never done that, right? I've never got to that place, but oh, you're gonna beam up.
I'm out of here.
But it is, you hopefully get to a point where you saying that very kind thing you said at the start of that, even though that's one person in the world, I don't care. One person in the world likes the movie. And so I'm like, that's a win for me. And it's things like that that make you go, okay, maybe we didn't completely waste our time. Do you know what I mean? And as crazy as that sounds, you should spend the whole time do you, like, paranoid that you're just an imposter?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's like, this was my first big studio film. So I spent every day being like, I don't know why I'm here. like Greg and Gareth are nuts for agreeing to bring me halfway around the world, as if I know what I'm doing. And then that stays in your head. That's a thought that you put in a little box, and then you put it in the drawer of, filing cabinet of your brain, and you shove it shut and you kick it and you lock it. And then you show up to set.
It fell out again. Oh no, quick, get it back in.
Exactly. The next day it falls out again. You're like, fucking stubborn thought, like, get back in there. I'm trying to make a movie here. But yeah,
I
it's
don't
like,
have any of those thoughts.
yeah, James just rolls
I know what
in,
you're talking about.
I'm the shit.
It's gonna
These
be the most
designs are
amazing
great.
thing every time.
But to explain, this is true, and I agree with you, right? Because James lives in the high point of the graph. This is when you're conceiving the film and it's getting higher. That's when you first talk to someone like a designer, right? Concept artist or a production designer. When it's like oh my God, it's going to be amazing. That's when you start painting pictures and it looks incredible and everyone's super excited. And then James, see you. Well, this is not what happened in our film, but typically on a production designer goes away a little bit and you don't see them. You're busy making the film, and we reunited. And this is a very unique thing, is that in post-production, usually the production designer has gone at the end of the shoot. James stayed on all through post with Industrial Light and Magic, doing all the visual effects, and all the other vendors as well, painting over everything. Like, it's basically everything that looks good in this film is because James painted it that way. And so
a team of people.
they're not.
They have names.
They're not here. They're not going to know. Just take the credit. Okay. Oh, this is going on the. Oh, shit.
Never mind. They're gonna know.
So essentially, James lives at the end as well as it gets better and better. So you're kind of a hero.
I'll take it.
Yeah, very good.
I don't feel those dips, but
Yeah.
I can see the darkness.
But also one thing I'll add is that on set, I don't feel it from Gareth. Like, Gareth shows up and I feel, oh, look, this guy's confidently making the movie, making all these shot choices, designing the shots, like, knows what he wants. As a DP, like, working with a director like that that's the dream, is to have somebody who just knows what they want. It feels so basic to say it, but there's a lot of people that don't even hit that bar, and that has taste.
But we're talking about somebody that has a track record. If it was Monsters, I'd be like, who the fuck is this guy?
Totally.
Like, with no money doing this. But I'm sorry, guys, it's Gareth Edwards.
Yeah.
Like, I had a certain amount of faith that the movie was going to be something.
Well, and I think
It
that the thing is on set, it doesn't show. So, you show up and you just make the movie. Like, and it was the same for me. It's like, you get up, you show up, even with those thoughts and even with doubt, you're like, but I need to make the movie, and I need to make this good, and I need to make sure this shot looks good and that this lighting setup is good. And it's like, all those thoughts, the doubt and all of it is like, it's always there, but it ultimately doesn't really matter, because what matters, at least for me in the cinematography side, is like, but I'm sure it's the same with the directing. It's what you're talking about with the edit. What matters is what's in the final movie, is where does it end up? And so it's like, you just need to put those thoughts in the box and take it day by day.
One thing to clarify, which is the schizophrenia of it, is so don't. This is where it just sounds like a contradiction, and it's hard to say this because we're in a room and people are recording it and it ends up on the internet. And I don't think anything I've done is any good ever, but there is part of your brain that goes, "This is going to be great, and I can do this, and I was born to do this."
Yeah.
Like, and I will do this and die in the attempt. And then the second you start doing it, like I have this strange thing where I'm so confident in my own head, like I'm really ultra confident. But the second it comes out of my head and I tell someone the idea or I film something and show someone it, I'm like, oh my God, this is shit. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I'm apologizing. I wish I'd never done it. But inside, it's amazing. And so there is this real big contradiction of like, it's not like you just constantly doubt yourself. Inside my head, I'm not at all. But then it's a really weird, complete kind
You
of
haven't
roller
noticed
coaster.
Gareth's English, and that's an English trait, is just not have that outward confidence. I think even though it's in your head.
Let's blame Britain for everything.
That's
James.
That's a good note to
It's
end
the
on.
American way.
All right. Do we have time for one more question, or one more? Pablo,
Here we
did you have
go.
a question? One
Oh.
more question, then we'll wrap it up.
Hi guys, I'm Pablo. Just want to say thank you to the three of you, and thank you to Atlas and Emmett too, because without Emmett, we wouldn't have Atlas here, and without Atlas, we wouldn't have you guys here. So thank you so much.
You could just thank us. You don't. Atlas are middlemen.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. But I go to school here, and I was wondering if I could ask Gareth for some advice. I'm a director here, and I related so much to, like, the process of making Monster, and how, as you're growing up in the industry or just making short films for yourself, you're doing everything, and you can't really get mad at a first AC when it's out of focus, because you're the one pulling focus, and you're kind of just doing everything all at once. And something I struggle with is, being on set and looking at the monitor and thinking, wow, this looks so good. But then I go start editing. I'm like, why did I do that? So when you're operating, how did you get to a place where you were able to not only compose and look at the performances, how were you able to finally be confident in what you were getting by, being able to operate and still know that you got what you needed for that take?
I mean, I feel the same way. I don't look at anything and go, oh, that's good. I always think it's bad. But I tell you what I do, and I don't know if this is answering what you're asking, but I when I'm holding that camera, I'm not there. I'm a year and a half away in the future in a cinema like this, just sat watching the film. And I really don't think I'm there. And I'm sat in the audience and I have an opinion about what I'm seeing. And I'm like, oh, that's shit. You know what I mean? Why didn't you go over here? And they're doing that wrong. Why didn't they do it like this? And whatever those thoughts are, I just start doing them as if I'm a slave to this critic a year and a half from now watching the footage, right? And so it's a really heavy camera. It's so heavy that you just want to put it down the second someone gives it you. But I would find we'd go action, we'd off we go. And I'm in the cinema and got such a strong opinion about what's going on that we'll do the whole take or whatever. We'll do reset, go, 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 go. And it'll end. And I'll hand it to someone. And often the boom guy, Jordan, would go, well, that was a record, so then you go, what? And he goes, that was a 45-minute take. And you're like, what? In my head, it was 3 minutes. And he was like, no, that was 45 minutes. And it was as light as a feather whilst we were filming, because like when a kid is trapped under a car, a mum can lift the car up to get the kid out. It's like that. It's like, this is your child under a car, right? And I'll do anything to save my kid. Like, it's so important to me that you just get in a trance. And so I feel like I'm you watching it in the edit, shouting at myself, going, why are you doing that? Do this, And so I'm not there. I'm really pretending I'm watching, and all these people are gone. Just block them out and just trust what you would think when you're calmly on a sofa in a air-conditioned room a year from now. And it sort of works. Well, you can say it doesn't if you watch the films, but it feels like that's kind of what I think psychologically, that's what I end up doing, if that is answering at all. Yeah, sorry.
All right. Well, thank you guys for being here. Really appreciate it. It's very special, very amazing. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Atlas, and everybody at Atlas for putting this together. Cool. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Check out the Atlas Mercury lenses.
And Atlas
available
are
now.
here filming it in 360 or something
Yes,
on the
we're-
VR.
we're-
It's not a
we're-
crazy weirdo. Well, it is a crazy weirdo.
This isn't an ad for the film. This is real life. Thanks, everybody. Yes.